Good morning, everyone, and welcome to M365 May, Australia and New Zealand. Today's session, we're talking about Teams integration, and so covering Teams request, approval, and automated creation using Azure Logic Apps and more. Just to kick this off, I would like to just welcome all of our speakers and participants from around the world. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this online conference is hosted and the traditional custodians of the lands where our Australian-based speakers and participants are located. We would also like to pay our respects to elders past, present and future. We do have a code of conduct. The main link is at the bottom of that page, but the sort of main takeaways there, I just want everyone to please be constructive, be respectful, be helpful and be kind. And you can go and review that after the session. I also want to just call out a big thank you to our sponsors who have sort of made this month-long conference possible and also provided prizes, and you'll have a bit of a chance later on to actually enter those prizes, so have your phone ready a little bit later on. So a little bit about me. My name is Mark DeBlanche. I'm a solutions architect at Alico, which is a systems integrator based in Melbourne. You may pick up from my accent that I'm not actually from here originally. I grew up in South Africa, but I've been in Australia now for about 13 years. For my LinkedIn and the Alico webpage links there, I do have a Twitter that I think the M365 might tag my Twitter account on, but I don't think I've tweeted there for about 3 years, so that's probably not going to be very useful to you. I'm also a co-organizer of the Microsoft 365 Technical Meetup, along with Lorian Strant, who's one of the organizers of M365 May, and that session is actually coming up a little later on this evening at about 5:30. All right, and let's get into the session. So what I'm going to be covering today is we're going to go through a Teams request approval and automated creation. And we actually have two solutions to talk through there, one which is a custom Alico developed solution and then a Microsoft solution that was released recently. And then also going through a bot integration. So talking about the FAQ, room bookings and some ServiceNow integration. So one of the very first decisions that people need to make in a sort of Teams deployment is, do I let anyone create a team? You know, are we going to just allow that sort of wild and open, or we're going to lock it down? So one of the things we find is if people just leave it all open and let anyone create teams, is you end up with team sprawl. So we can end up with, say, a marketing team, John's marketing team, a marketing all team, and you end up with a lot of confusion. Nobody really knows which team is which. We also end up with a lot of test teams. So I know that whenever I'm doing these things, I end up with that sort of test 1, a test for Mark test 3, and I can never even get my testing naming conventions going right. But also then if we're going to start using teams for projects and things like that, you know, we generally want to try and keep some sort of naming convention going. So, you know, often we end up with a project alpha, beta project, you know, so we just end up with a bit of a mess and a mix and match. And then you end up with a project which Jack and Jill have set up for the two of them to work on, but nobody actually even knows what that's for. We also end up, often people want to create sort of internal communications, or maybe all staff or all company teams, or there's a CEO team and then nobody knows, is that for the CEO to communicate out to the public, or is that just for him to use with his internal team? So the bottom line is it just creates confusion and a bit of a mess and a bit of sprawl. I guess if we go the other side of the coin though, we want and lock it down, you have the ability to restrict Office 365 group creation so that only members of a specific security group can create teams. And that link there just describes how to do that. But that also ends up with a few problems. So one is, how are users going to request a team? Are they going to log a service desk ticket? Are they going to email somebody? Are they going to just walk over to somebody that they know in the service desk? Are they going to call Bob? And then how will you decide if this team is allowed or not? And how long will it actually take to get a team created? So we have quite a few customers that we've seen do this, where then they somebody has to go through a service desk ticket, and maybe it takes a day, maybe it takes a week before that person actually gets access to that team that they need to actually get their work done. So what is the middle road there? The solution is to automate it. So what we want to do is do an easy request process for people, an easy approval process for the administrators, and then also and once it is approved, actually go and create the team. The first one I want to talk about, and what I was going to spend most of my time originally today talking about, was a custom solution developed by Olica. So our development team, sort of based on some of the pain points that users or some of our customers had, developed a solution which is based on a form which people enter the team, goes into a Logic app, the approval process kicks off, the Logic app continues, and then it goes and calls an Azure function to go and create their team. Now, the reason it's calling an Azure function is some of the functionality wasn't available at the time to do all of that in Logic apps. But, excuse me, as of last week then, Microsoft actually released an app template. So they've got a couple of these app templates for things like the crisis communication app, but they released this request a team app template. And this basically does a very similar thing. And it uses a Power App, which then jumps into Power Automate or Flow. It goes through the approval works, posting to teams, and then has a Logic app which stores all of that request status in a SharePoint list. Now, I must say that this Microsoft deployment is not quite as simple as it looked when we initially heard about it, and it is very, very detailed. So just be aware this is not something you're just going to sort of click add to teams and it will be available to you. And it can go wrong very easily. So I actually only ended up getting this working on my third try. The first time ended up with the prerequisite PowerShell modules that didn't install properly. The second time I reran it with a different name, but there are a few hard-coded names in the deployment script, so that meant that some functionality failed. So you need to make sure that you remove any Azure resource groups if you are deploying that all over again. And there is a lot to edit in those templates. It's a very, very detailed deployment process. And something I actually just forgot to mention at the beginning is you do have the Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen. So because I only have half an hour with this, I think we'll leave all of the questions to the end, but as soon as we're finished, we can run through any of those questions. So now what I wanted to do is actually jump into the demo. So the first part we're going to talk through is the Olica solution, and then the second one is the Microsoft solution. So let me jump into Google Chrome. So in this case, this is a new Microsoft form that we're going to create. That we have created that is for the team's request. So in this case, I'm going to say M365 demo Olica 1, and we can just put a purpose of the team, and this is just to help the approver have some information. The next part is basically asking a question about what will the team be used for. So we can actually, based on this selection, go and create different templates if we want to. At the moment, I'm just going to use this for collaboration. And what we do need to do as well is the person who requests it automatically becomes the owner of the team. We also need to put in another person who's going to be an owner. A recommendation is always to have at least 2 owners in a team. We can put a third owner there as well if we want, and then we just have a choice between are we doing either a private team or a public team. So a private team will be restricted to just those invited members. And then the last one could just again be used by the approver if they need to reach out and to provide any assistance to those people. So we're going to hit submit. So the form response has been submitted. I'm now going to jump into the Logic app that's actually running in the background to go and do this. We can see our Logic app is running. So new response came from the form, got the response details, it sent an approval email, and in this case, our approval email is going straight into the Microsoft Teams channel. So we can see that we had an approval for your request, and now the administrator can either do this here in Teams, or because they got it in an email as well, can just hit approve or reject. So if we approve that, the response has been registered. If we jump back to our Logic app, we can see that it has received that response. It's gone into the approval rejection. It's going to compose, and then it calls out that Microsoft Teams function. So I jump back into Teams. I should very soon see a new team pop up there, M365 demo from Olica 1. And if I manage that team, I can see then that I'm the owner as the requester, and then we also have our seconded owner there. So very simple, very quick process. And the main thing is really that once that is approved, there's nothing else that has to be done. We don't have any service desk tickets. We don't have anything else where somebody needs to go and rekey in information or put in different owners and members. That all just sort of happens automatically. So then what I want to show you is basically the Microsoft solution. So this is launched from a Power App, so we can access this Power App either directly in a website. We can also do it through Teams, either as an application here or just as embedded as as a page or a tab in Team. In this case, I'm just going to do it from here. So we do have two choices here. We can either create a team from scratch, or we can use templates. And so templates, some of the things like an all company team or any custom templates that you can create can actually be done here. In this case, I'm going to just build a new one from scratch. So first choice is it going to be a private or public team? I will choose private. I'll give our team a name. Just check the availability to make sure that that team name isn't created, or it doesn't exist, because otherwise that will obviously fail when it gets created later on. And then one of the big differences you'll notice here actually is that if I put the first owner and I start typing my name, it actually does a people picker and lists and gives me some options. So instead of having to know somebody's email address or look it up, I can just start typing that person's name. So 2 owners, and then I can do up to 2 members here as well. So I'm going to choose Patty Fernandez there and hit submit. So what's happening here now is it's basically just offering to take me to the request status page. And we can see that this most recent request is in a submitted status. So if I refresh this, I should hopefully, if the demo gods are playing nicely with me, should change into an approval state very soon. And while I'm waiting for that, let me jump into the Power Automate that's actually running this through this approval process. We can see that is running. So all of this is actually run out of a SharePoint site, so I can actually show you that SharePoint site here as well. So here's my M365 demo Microsoft One. It is in pending approval state, and we can see here that it initialized all of the variables, updated that status to pending approval. It's running through the Teams request process. And if we jump back to our team here, we should be able to see that it is now in pending approval status. So if I jump back as my Teams administrator now, it has posted into my Teams channel that there's something with pending approval. So M365 demo Microsoft One has been created there, and now as the administrator, I can obviously reject that if there's some information there that it's incorrect, or I can approve it. I can also put some comments there, and that's obviously more useful if I'm doing a rejection, but I can now just hit submit there. The other nice thing about this is that if we would assume we have multiple people in the team that does the administration, we can actually see now that a response has been submitted by me. So they know that that has been dealt with. So I look now, status was pending approval. It is now changed to approved status. And if we should very soon, we're waiting for that Logic app to kick in, which at the moment is set to every 30 seconds. Should see a change to team creation very shortly. It's taking a little bit longer than I would like. There it is, team creation. So what's happening now in the background is that we have a Logic app running. Let's open up our most recent one. And you might notice actually on the left-hand side that this Logic app takes generally sort of 8-9 minutes. One I did a little bit earlier for some reason took a little bit longer, and I'll talk through why this one takes a lot longer than the other one that we saw a little bit earlier. So again, it's just reading out of a SharePoint list. It's updating that team creation status on the item in the list, going through all the variables. It's checking whether that SharePoint site exists. It's looping through the members, looping through the owners. It's then checking the team's template, and it's actually then has gone and actually created that team. So one of the reasons for the time that this takes is we have this actually 2-minute delay here while it waits for that team to actually be provisioned before it jumps into the next step. And then there are there's another 3-minute delay that kicks in a little bit later on. So while we are waiting for that, I think we will jump back to the slide deck. And now is your time to get out the phone, scan that QR code and enter. So just something to be aware of. You do need to have been registered by the M365 Maze site. So the competition and prize rules are at the bottom of the page there. And you also, I think, need to have said that you would provide your information to the sponsors as part of that registration. So I'll just give you a few more seconds to grab the QR code. All right, moving on. So the second part that I wanted to talk about is about Teams bot. So one of the things once you start using a few different bots is, do you want many bots or do you want one bot to rule them all? So we often find different bots have different ways that they expect people to interact with them or to ask information from them. So we think that a better solution is to actually go down having the single bot to manage all of that communication. So our development team created Ollie or Olive, depending on which sort of avatar you want to go with, which is an enterprise engagement platform. It's a custom bot developed by Olica for connecting people, bots, and tools to enable collaboration and fast access to data. So some of the use cases for that are things like corporate FAQs. We could do internal company information, but also information, say, if you're deploying Teams or deploying Office 365 or Windows 10, you can have a whole lot of questions and answers that people typically have there. We can also do repeatable IT functions, so things like booking a room, provisioning a virtual desktop, or requesting an application. And then we also have enterprise app integration, so things like service desk, CRM, HR integration. So, one of the things that we have done there is to say, somebody wakes up in the morning and they're not feeling very well, so they can say to Ollie, I'm sick. Ollie will go check the person's calendar, go see what appointments they have. It will then offer to say, well, I can see you've got 3 appointments. Do you want me to let these people know that you won't be able to make those today? The person says yes or no, and then Ollie will say, well, do you want to book a sick leave in HR? And if the person says yes, it will go, call an API against the HR system and actually log a sick leave. Log your sick leave in the HR system there. And something else, that we've been doing a lot of recently is around the staff culture. So particularly with everyone working remotely now, and we've been using this internally to do a sort of employee pulse, so sort of every day or every couple of days, just ask people how they're going, collate that information back into, give our sort of HR people management side, some information on how everyone's doing. We also use it to email new starters, send happy birthdays, when it's people's birthdays based on a table stored somewhere else. So essentially, what can be done is unlimited, but obviously all of these do take a bit of time to make sure that it's all working as expected, and it's really going to be limited by whatever APIs are available. So with that, I want to jump back into the demo. So we'll go through with this bot some FAQ, room booking, and then ServiceNow request and status, and then check back on how that Teams creation is going. So I'm going to jump back to Teams and see our Ollie bot here. And I was just trying to clear my screen so I didn't show you what was going on there before. So some of the things, if we look at the FAQ, I can just say something like, what's the phone number? Comes back with the phone number. I can ask things like Microsoft competencies. And what we can do here is actually open up some URL links as well. So we can then click on that, opens up a Microsoft page with Microsoft competencies. But we can also do other sort of URI-based things. So we can actually open up Windows settings if that's something that people are asking about Windows 10. How do I change my screen resolution or whatever it is? You can actually have a link that opens that up directly in Windows. We can also do things like search the GAL for somebody's information. So in this case, we found 2 users named Mark. I'm not going to click on mine because I don't really want to show everyone my phone number right now. So I'm going to choose my test account. And in here we can show the email, the phone number, and we can just click email or call if that's what we want to do. We can also ask, say, what is Teams? So, people are doing a deployment of Teams want to give a little bit of information. Gives a little bit of an overview of what Teams is. We can also click here and open up a site that has a whole lot of video links and information on what Teams is. And sorry, I know I'm running through this very quickly, but I'm just aware I don't want to run out of time and also give people a little bit of time for questions. So if we jump then off to the room booking side, so I can say something like book room today, 3 p.m. In this case, we only have one location, but obviously if you have multiple locations, based on the Office 365 sites and sort of room lists, in this case, we're choosing just Melbourne. It wants to know the room size. So, we want to make sure that if we have 10 people in a meeting, we don't book a meeting room that can only take 4. So I'm going to say we need 4 people. It's going to grab a list of those rooms and I can flip between, choose one of those rooms. I'm going to book Street Fighter 2. And that reservation has been sent. So that then updates my calendar and the room booking calendar just with my name, and it obviously goes into the email. So last piece I want to just sort of show off with the bot is some of that service desk integration. So in this case, we're looking at it with ServiceNow. So we just have a ServiceNow demo ticket, demo tenant. So if I say show tickets, so by default, it will check for any tickets from the last 4 weeks, but you can get my tickets from today or the last week if you want. So what I can also do, while I'm there, I can actually request an update on a ticket if I wanted to. So this will actually then ping into the service desk to say that you're looking for an update. The other thing I can do though is actually log a ticket. So log a ticket, I'm going to then log a ticket for a technical problem. Ollie wants to just know a little bit more information about what this is. So if I say my laptop is not starting. So what it's doing now is actually going to go query ServiceNow to find out what categories that I've got for these ticket requests. So in this case, I'm going to say hardware. We'll then go and grab any subcategories. And in this demo tenant, I've only got one subcategory, which is laptop. And then actually goes and creates that ServiceNow ticket. And if I query the tickets again, that was the one from yesterday. And there's the one, no, that was another one. I've obviously been creating too many test tickets. So that is it from that bot demo. So what I wanted to jump back to then is go back to our Logic app. So where we got to last time was where we had our team 2-minute delay where we were waiting for that team to provision. It's now moved on to the next steps, getting the JSON with that team information, going through the team members, the team owners, and then what it does is it adds a service account into the group and then waits for 3 minutes before it then posts a welcome message to this general channel. So I think that these sort of 2 and 3 minute delays are probably a little bit conservative, just to make sure that everything happens, that we don't end up with a failure halfway through there. But if you don't need this welcome post message, you can actually save just over 3 minutes of the whole team's creation process by removing this this piece. It will then create any private channels if that was needed as part of that template. send a team created welcome email, and update the status. So if I jump back to the status here in the Power App, I can see that the team has been created. If I go back to Teams, I did notice as we're changing through, the team has actually been created. We can see that there is a post, a welcome post in the team. We can see that the Request Teams app added the Teams creation service account. It did the post to the team and then has actually removed that service account. So if I have a look at the team members here, you can see that I was one of the owners, Megan was the other owner that was added there. And then we also have Patty, who we selected as a member. So one of the other things that I just wanted to show you here very quickly in this Microsoft solution is if we have a reject, somebody, the admin rejects that request, they can put some comments into that. One of the nice things you can do here is you can actually clone that request. So we can clone the request. I'm going to just change something there, check the availability, and if I wanted to, then I can just submit that as a brand new request. And anyone who hits this Power App will only actually be able to see their own requests that they created there. And I think that is it from the demo side. So what I wanted to just show you, then talk through very quickly is, and these slides will be made available to you in the recording at a later time, is just a little bit of a cheat sheet for this deployment demo. What I've done and a little bit of sort of highlighted is some of the things that would need to be added. So I would recommend running these prerequisites before you go and run the deployment script. There's a very specific version of the SharePoint PnP PowerShell module that is needed. And also if you have the Azure AD module loaded already, then it actually fails in the deployment script, and that's what stopped my deployment from working the first time. So you actually need to do the allow clobber to allow it to load those to repeated PowerShell commandlets, and then also needed to actually close and reopen PowerShell as an admin to make sure all of those new modules were loaded properly. A couple of other prerequisites there was we actually do need a service account, which is used to do the team, the Teams posting and the emailing. So that does need a Teams license, but also needs an Exchange license, which wasn't sort of called out in that deployment guide. We need a team for that administrator approval, and then we need two variables, the tenant ID and the Azure subscription ID, in order to do this deployment. And I guess that's just something I didn't call out before, but you do actually need an Azure subscription to do this. I think mine has cost me 4 cents so far with all of the testing that I'm doing, so it's not a big deal, but it does just need an Azure subscription. And here's an example of that deployment template, and I have just added the tenant ID onto the end, which wasn't in those original instructions. Also be aware there will be quite a few admin credential prompts. So the first ones are the admin credentials for the various PowerShell modules right at the beginning, and then after about 5 minutes you'll end up with a whole lot of authentication requests, which are actually for the service account. So make sure you put the service account username and password in there for those Logic App connections. And then the last one is just a very high level summary of these steps, but you do need to follow very, very carefully the deployment guide. So, getting the group ID and the channel ID and putting them into the SharePoint requests list, registering the request team's application ID in SharePoint, setting up the Power App, and sharing that out to everyone. And also make sure to save and publish the Power App after editing. That wasn't explicitly called out in the instructions. You need to set up Power Automate, set up the Logic App, and then I would also recommend changing the check frequency in that Logic App from 1 hour, which is the default, to 1 minute, or I did mine in 30 seconds to try and make it happen a little bit faster. We need to share the SharePoint site out, and then we can download that Power App Teams zip file and add that into Teams. And that is it from my presentation. So I just want to say a really big thank you to all of the sponsors who've made this month-long event possible. So, providing the prizes, but also support and assistance, for the organizing team. But also want to say a big thank you to all of the organizers of M365 May. So Lorian, Megan, Rebecca, Daryl, and others who I'm sure are also working behind the scenes there. And with that, I will jump to see if there are any questions. Looks like we've got 2 questions there. First one from Sam. How did you find the deployment of the solution? So any insights, issues, gotchas you can share? So definitely quite a few gotchas. You know, it is a fairly complicated solution. So that's sort of why I put that sort of cheat sheet in there from that Microsoft solution. Definitely the PowerShell modules and making sure that if you do deploy it, that you remove everything from Azure first, because that's really going to be the challenge. You know, it is going to be flexible if you can customize that after the fact, if that's something that you want to do. But you know, I'm assuming that Microsoft are going to be sort of reiterating on this, you know, and upgrading it as we go. And you know, I guess that's always part of the problem with, you know, for our development teams is, you know, we see a gap, we do something to fill that gap, but you sort of know in the back of your mind that if it's something that a lot of people are asking for, Microsoft are going to come in and you know, do a solution for that as they go. And Sam also asked, do you think this could be manipulated at all to add a classification of a site or team for automation of retention and labeling? So yes, definitely. So you know, any of that, this can all be done as part of that Graph API post call that happens in the Logic app. So yes, you could set, you know, you could set tags on there, classifications, and you know, you could also do it based on custom templates as well. So if you have any custom Teams templates that you've created, you can go and add those into the SharePoint site on Teams and add those in. And looks like that is all of the questions. Yep, I think that is it. So I don't know if there aren't any more questions at that point, then I think we may call it there. So thank you very much for joining, everyone. It was really enjoyed being part of M365 May, and then we do have another session actually at 5:30 with Lauren and myself that will be happening later today. So thank you very much and have a good day.